We have covered slope by counting rise and run. We have covered slope using point slope, or using the slope formula where we subtract the y's over subtracting the x's. We've done y equals mx plus b. We've done standard form, graphing y equals mx plus b, and graphing by intercepts using the standard form, ax plus by equals c, and our special case. So we're now getting into a new formula, the point slope formula, but basically it simplifies to y equals mx plus b. Okay? Basically, if you're given a point and the slope, you're able to figure out the y equals mx plus b from using this formula. That's why we call it a point slope formula, because you need minimum 1 point and the slope. Basically, the formula is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Now, this y1 and this x1 are from the given point, and the 1 just represents it's the 1 point that you're given. And then we use the m to substitute. This y and this x stay y and x. It's the same y and x in the y equals mx plus b form. So for example, on number 1, we plug in our points. I always think we subtract the y's and we subtract the x's together. The only difference is we're going to distribute the slope on the x's. It's kind of like our slope formula, and the way I like to make the connection is just like slope, where we subtract the y's first. We're going to do that. The only difference is the first y stays y, because that's this y, minus the y of the point, which is 1, equals, now we do the slope, which is 2 times, now we subtract the x's. The first x stays the variable, because that's this x, minus the x from the point, which is 4. Now we're using our equation solving skills where basically we're just going to distribute, and then we're going to add the 1 to the other side so we can isolate the y. So we have y minus 1 equals 2x minus 8. Add the 1 to both sides, so you get y equals 2x minus 7. And there is your y equals mx plus b. And we know the b is negative 7 because it's the minus 7. Okay, so let's review distributing fractions. We're going to do the same thing, okay? You do y minus the y, which in this case is 0, equals our slope, which is 2/3, times x minus the x, which is negative 6. Now remember, subtracting a negative becomes, you do the keep change opposite, or 2 negatives make a positive, right? And when we distribute this 2/3, well, the 2/3 times x, we're just going to keep as our slope times the x. But then when we distribute the 2/3 times 6, we're going to put the 6 over 1. We're going to multiply numerators and distribute, so distribute numerators and distribute denominators, okay? And by the way, anytime we're subtracting or adding 0, it doesn't change the value. So y minus 0 is just y, and then we distribute the 2/3 x, and then 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 1 is 3. Now we just divide this, and we're done. So we get y equals 2/3 x plus 4. There's our y equals mx plus b. If it wasn't minus 0, basically we'd want to divide this first and then add to isolate the y for our last step if it was necessary, okay? So let's go ahead and do number 5 together, and then I'm going to have you do 2, 4, and 6 on your own, and then stop the video and check to make sure before we go on to the next part of the lesson. So again, we subtract the y's. The first y is the variable, minus negative 3 from our point, equals our slope, which is negative 1, times x minus 4 from our point. Y minus negative 3, so keep flip change or keep change opposite, or 2 negatives make a positive. just becomes y plus 3 equals, now we distribute our -1, so I'm going to just keep it as -1x for notes purposes, and -1 times -4 is +4. Now we isolate the y by just subtracting the +3, so we get y equals -1x, and then this becomes +1. Now our final answer, remember we said you don't have to write the 1. I wasn't sure if I had, until the end, right, what we had to do with that. So we just can write it for our final answer is -x plus 1, and then you should be able to read the m and the b without that 1 there, like we've done previous lessons. Okay, so do 2, 4, and 6. Check to see by the answer key and see if you got it correct. Bring any questions to class. And we're given 2 points instead of a point and a slope. So let me show you the difference, okay? So this one, we were given 1 point and the slope. Here, we're given 2 points. Well, guess what? Basically, step 1, we have to use the slope formula. Remember, we could use 2 points, and basically we could find the slope by finding delta y over delta x, which basically means subtract the y's over subtract the x's in the same order. Then step 2, when you use the point slope formula, basically just choose 1 point and your m. So basically, choose 1 point. You can use the same x1, y1. I usually just choose the smaller numbers because smaller numbers are easier to work with. And the m that you found in step 1. So remember this was basically the first day we did slope, we used the slope formula. So we find the m using the slope formula with both points. Then we choose 1 point. And my tip is use the smaller values, the smaller x's and y's, and then just plug it into the y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 like we did here. So there's really only 1 extra step, and we just choose one of the 2 points. So let's look at that. Okay, so for number 7, first step, I'm going to go ahead and subtract the y's over the x's to find the slope. So I have 7 minus -1 over -3 minus 1. Do my keep change opposite. I get 8 over -4, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide that to simplify my m, because you want to, anytime we're dealing with equations, you want to simplify your slope. Okay, so you want to simplify m all the way. The only time you don't simplify your m is when you need your rise over run to graph. Okay, but 8 divided by -4 is -2. And frankly, so I'm going to use the m, and I'm going to use this point because it's a smaller to plug into this formula. And basically, I'm subtracting the y's again, except remember this first y and this x are just going to stay the variable. And for the y1, I'm going to use the -1, and for the x1, I'm going to use the +1 from this point. And then obviously for the m, I'm going to use -2. So for step 2, I'm going to use this formula. So it's y minus -1 equals our slope that we found in part 1 times x minus the 1 in the point. So now all we're going to do is simplify. So we get y plus 1 equals -2x plus 2. Isolate the y by subtracting the 1 on both sides. So I get y equals -2x, and then 2 and -1, I didn't really write that in the column like I should, is plus 1. So that's our answer for number 7. Okay, so let's do the same thing. So number 9, to find the slope first, because that's our step 1, we're going to subtract the y's. So -1 oops, I did that wrong, minus -6 over 2 minus 4. Keep change opposite. So I get +5 over -2. Again, if you want to do keep change opposite, If that's easier for you to do, that's perfectly fine. So I'm going to use this slope because I can't reduce 5 over negative 2, and I'll just keep it as negative 5 halves. I know a positive divided by negative is negative. And frankly, I'm just going to use this point because their two numbers are smaller than the other point. That's it. That's the only reason. I like to work with smallest numbers to minimize the difficulty. Okay, now I'm going to subtract the y's. So I'm going to use the variable minus the y of the point. So y minus negative 6 equals, use my slope, so negative 5 halves times x minus 4 from that point. Okay, I simplify this doing my keep change opposite, so it becomes y plus 6 equals, and then when I distribute my slope, negative 5 halves times x is just negative 5 halves x. And then a fraction times my whole number, I just put the whole number over 1. And a negative times a negative is positive. 5 times 4 is 20. Over 2 times 1 is 2. And then all I have to do is do the division. And so I get, okay, I'm going to write it over here just because I have more room. So I have y plus 6 equals negative 5 halves x. And then 20 divided by 2 is plus 10. Now I just isolate my y by subtracting the 6. So y equals negative 5 halves x plus 4. Okay. All right, so the last one, number, okay. All right, so the last one, number 11, let's do together, and then I'm going to have you do 8, 10, and 12 and check to see if you did those correctly and bring any questions to class for clarification. All right, so again, we're finding our slope first. So let's subtract our y's. So negative 3 minus negative 1 over negative 6 minus negative 4. Do your keep change opposite. So we get negative 2 over negative 2, which I love, a slope of 1, because when you divide negative 2 by negative 2, that reduces, and that's an easy slope to deal with. I'm going to choose this point for the second half. So it becomes y minus negative 1 equals 1 times x minus 4. I just do my keep change opposite, and frankly, dividing or distributing by 1 doesn't change. I just don't need the parentheses anymore, so I have y plus 1 equals, I'm just going to write it as x instead of 1x minus 4. Isolate the y by subtracting the 1. So we get y equals x minus 5, and that's my final answer. So go ahead and do 8, 10, and 12. Stop the video and check to see if you're correct and bring any questions to class.